First contact. The Luminera drifted silently through the void, its gleaming hull reflecting the light of unfamiliar stars. Captain Vexlor stood on the command deck, all four of his violet eyes fixed on the holographic display that hovered before him. His slender, seven-fingered hand adjusted the projection, zooming in on the anomalous planetary body that had caught the ship's attention. "Curious," he murmured, his translator converting the clicks and whistles of his native tongue into the standardized Galactic common. "This doesn't match any of our charts." Science Officer Zelterra approached, her scale-like skin shimmering under the soft blue lights of the bridge. "The planet shouldn't be here, Captain. Our stellar maps were updated less than a cycle ago. And yet, here it is." Vexlor's secondary eyelids blinked in rapid succession, a sign of intense curiosity among the Vexari. "More intriguing still, I'm detecting energy signatures, artificial ones." The bridge fell silent. The Galactic Concordat had mapped this sector extensively over the last 3 centuries. For an inhabited world to remain undetected was unprecedented and potentially alarming. "Prepare an expedition team," Vexlor ordered, his dorsal crest rising with excitement. "I want surface contact within the rotation." The descent through the planet's atmosphere was turbulent, the expedition shuttle buffeted by powerful winds and electromagnetic disturbances that played havoc with their instruments. When they finally broke through the cloud cover, the landscape below left the team speechless. Sprawling settlements dotted the terrain, connected by what appeared to be transportation networks. Fields of cultivated vegetation spread in geometric patterns across fertile valleys. And most shocking of all, the unmistakable signatures of fusion power. "Impossible," whispered Zelterra as they circled a particularly large settlement. "This level of technological development would have been detected by our long-range scanners. Unless," Navigation Officer Krell interjected, "they didn't want to be found." The shuttle landed in a clearing 2 kilometers from the main settlement. The air was breathable, the gravity slightly stronger than standard. The team emerged cautiously, scanning devices sweeping the surrounding area. "Life signs approaching," warned Security Chief Drax, his muscular hand resting on his discipler. Multiple subjects, moving in formation. They appeared over the ridge like ghosts materializing from the mist, bipedal with bilateral symmetry and exposed epidermis in various shades of brown and beige. Most were clothed in functional garments of muted colors, while some wore what appeared to be protective gear. "Humans," gasped Zelterra, her voice barely audible. "But that's impossible," completed Vexlor, echoing her earlier assessment. The human species was classified as extinct following the Harbinger War. Their homeworld destroyed, their colonies abandoned. And yet the evidence stood before them. A dozen humans approaching with purposeful strides, carrying weapons that the Vexari scanners identified as highly advanced pulse rifles. One human stepped forward, taller than the others, with dark skin and intricate patterns etched into the visible portions of their epidermis. They spoke, the sounds incomprehensible to the Vexari's universal translators. Vexlor raised his hands, palms forward in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "We come with peaceful intent," he said, knowing his words would be equally meaningless to the humans. The human leader studied them for a moment, then activated a device on their wrist. A holographic interface sprang to life, displaying rapidly scrolling symbols. After several minutes of adjustments, the device emitted a series of tones. "Welcome to New Terra." The translation was crude but understandable. "I am Marshal Amarale. You are the first visitors we've had in 300 years. The revelation struck Vexlor like a physical blow. "You've been here all this time." Marshal Lay's expression remained unreadable. "Follow me. Our Primarch will want to meet you." The human settlement, New Haven, they called it, was far more advanced than it had appeared from above. Buildings that had seemed simple from a distance revealed themselves to be complex structures, some extending deep underground. The technology was unlike anything in the Concordat, not necessarily more advanced, but fundamentally different in approach and execution. They were led to a circular structure at the center of the settlement. Inside, the air was cool and filled with the soft hum of machinery. More humans awaited them, including one seated in an elevated position who radiated authority. "I am Primarch Elena Voss," the seated human said, her voice now clearly translated through the device Marshal Lay had calibrated. "For 3 centuries, we have maintained our isolation from the galaxy. Now you have found us. The question is, what happens next?" Vexlor stepped forward. "I am Captain Vexlor of the Galactic Concordat exploration vessel Luminara. We believe your species to be extinct." "A convenient assumption," replied the Primarch, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "One we carefully cultivated." Over the next several hours, the humans shared their extraordinary story. Earth had indeed been destroyed during a Harbinger War, but not before several colony ships had escaped, equipped with experimental technology that allowed them to phase partially out of normal spacetime. "Our ancestors called it the quantum veil," explained Dr. Soren Chen, the colony's chief scientist. "It bends light and energy around us, making us effectively invisible to conventional sensors. We've been hiding in plain sight." "But why?" asked Zelterra. "The Concordat would have offered protection, resources." Primarch Voss's expression hardened. "After watching our homeworld burn, after seeing how the so-called Galactic Council abandoned Earth to the Harbingers, forgive us if we chose self-reliance over false promises." The tension in the room grew palpable. Vexlor's diplomatic training took over. "The past cannot be changed, but perhaps the future can be shaped differently. Your survival is nothing short of miraculous. What you've built here—" He was interrupted by a piercing alarm. Dr. Chen rushed to a nearby console, his fingers flying over the interface. "Primarch, the beacon. It's activating." "What beacon?" demanded Vexlor, but his question went unanswered as the humans burst into coordinated activity. Marshal Lay turned to him, her expression grave. "You should come with us. There's something you need to see." They were led through a series of underground passages, descending deeper than Vexlor had thought possible. The temperature dropped noticeably, and the walls changed from manufactured materials to what appeared to be natural stone, except the stone itself seemed to pulse with faint lines of energy. "What is this place?" whispered Zelterra, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "We call it the Nexus," replied Dr. Chen as they approached a massive door inscribed with symbols that matched no known Concordat language. "It was here when our ancestors arrived. We've been studying it for centuries, but much of it remains a mystery." The door slid open silently, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond. In its center stood a pulsating crystalline structure, its surface etched with the same incomprehensible symbols. Energy cascaded from its apex in visible waves, illuminating the chamber in an ethereal blue glow. "The beacon has never activated like this before," said Primarch Voss, her voice tight with concern. "Not in all our years of study." "It responded to their arrival," Marshal Lay suggested, nodding toward the Vexari, "as if it was waiting for someone to find us." Dr. Chen approached a control panel adjacent to the crystal. "The energy output is increasing exponentially. It's broadcasting something. A signal." "To whom?" asked Vexlor, a sense of foreboding settling over him. Before anyone could respond, the crystal pulsed brilliantly, and a wave of energy washed over them all. Images flooded Vexlor's mind, stars exploding, civilizations rising and falling, and shadowy figures, manipulating it all from behind the scenes. He gasped, staggering backward as the vision subsided. Around him, both humans and Vexari were having similar reactions, clutching their heads or supporting themselves against the walls. "A psychic imprint," murmured Zelterra, her scientific mind already analyzing the experience. "But the information, it's too complex, too alien." "The predecessors," whispered Dr. Chen, his eyes wide with realization. "The beacon is telling their story." "Who are the predecessors?" demanded Vexlor. Primarch Voss turned to him, her expression solemn. "We don't know, exactly. But we believe they were here long before humans evolved on Earth, long before your species developed interstellar travel. Their technology is scattered throughout this planet. We've built our colony around their relics, learning what we could." A second alarm sounded, this one more urgent than the first. Marshall Lay activated her wrist device, her face paling at whatever information it displayed. "Primarch, we're detecting multiple ships entering the system. They're not responding to identification requests." Vexlor felt his blood run cold. "The Luminara?" Lay shook her head. "No. Unknown configuration, but their energy signatures." She hesitated. "They match patterns we've seen in the Nexus archives." Dr. Chen's voice was barely a whisper. The beacon wasn't just telling a story, it was calling them home. As if responding to his words, the crystal pulsed again, more powerfully than before. This time, the wave of energy that washed over them carried not images, but a singular, overwhelming emotion: anticipation. Whoever, or whatever, had built the beacon was returning, and neither humans nor the Galactic Concordat were prepared for what that meant. The revelation. The command center of New Haven hummed with urgent activity. Holographic displays showed the approaching vessels, 7 of them, arranged in a formation that suggested both purpose and intelligence. Their design defied conventional understanding, organic curves blending seamlessly with crystalline structures that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Time to arrival. Primarch Voss's voice was calm, belying the tension evident in the rigid set of her shoulders. 3 hours, replied Marshall Lay, studying the tactical display. "We've activated the quantum veil, but..." She hesitated. "It's not working. They can see us." Captain Vexlor exchanged glances with his science officer. This development violated everything they understood about detection technology. "How is that possible?" Dr. Chen gestured toward another display showing energy readings from the beacon. "The Nexus is generating some kind of anti-phase resonance. It's effectively neutralizing our cloaking technology." "Can you shut it down?" asked Vexlor. The human scientist shook his head. "We've tried. The systems aren't responding to any of our override protocols." Primarch Voss turned to face the Vexari captain. "It seems we have little choice but to prepare for first contact." Again, her gaze was piercing. "The question is, will your Concordat stand with us this time?" The accusation stung, but Vexlor understood the human's lingering bitterness. "The Luminara is at your disposal, Primarch. Whatever these visitors want, we face it together." His words seemed to satisfy her. With a nod, she turned back to her people. "Implement Defense Protocol Omega. Evacuate non-essential personnel to the bunkers. Dr. Chen, I want everything we know about the predecessors compiled and ready. Marshall Lay, coordinate with Captain Vexlor on defensive strategies." As the humans rushed to comply, Zelterra approached her captain, keeping her voice low. "Sir, we should consider contacting the Concordat. If these vessels represent a previously unknown species with this level of technology. The nearest Concordat outpost is 3 weeks away at maximum FTL." Vexlor interrupted. "We're on our own." The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. The humans revealed defensive capabilities that surprised even Vexlor. Energy shields that could withstand direct plasma bombardment, weapons systems that utilized principles of quantum manipulation, and most impressively, a network of satellites capable of generating a localized distortion in space-time. "You've been busy these past centuries," he remarked to Marshall Lay as they finalized their defensive perimeter. "Necessity breeds innovation," she replied without looking up from her work. "When you know you're alone in a hostile universe, you learn to protect yourself." Vexlor wanted to dispute her characterization of the universe as hostile, but recent events made such arguments seem hollow. Instead, he focused on the task at hand. "The Luminara can provide additional firepower from orbit," he offered. "Our phase cannons air." He was interrupted by a sudden, blinding flash of light. Every display in the command center flickered and died, then reactivated moments later. Energy surged from the Nexus, reported Dr. Chen, his fingers flying over his console. The beacon just transmitted something. Before anyone could respond, a new voice filled the command center, or perhaps not a voice at all, but rather a sensation of communication translated imperfectly by their minds into words. We have and you. The words resonated not in their ears but in their minds, accompanied by a pressure that made Vexilor's head throb. Around him, he saw humans and Vexori alike wincing in discomfort. The ships, whispered Lei, pointing to the tactical display. The 7 vessels had accelerated dramatically, closing the distance to New Terra in minutes rather than hours. They now hung in orbit, their crystalline structures refracting the sunlight in hypnotic patterns. The sea-like continues. Remark Voss stepped forward, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Identify yourselves. What is your purpose here? A pause, as if the entity, or entities, were considering her demand. We are peers. UAAV act AI. Hiki seed. The harvest begins. A new alarm sounded. Proximity warnings from the surface defense grid. Smaller craft were detaching from the 7 vessels, descending toward New Terra in a precise formation. They're heading for the Nexus, reported Lei, tracking their trajectory. Intercept them, ordered Voss. But even as she spoke, the defensive systems targeting the incoming craft went offline one by one. They're neutralizing our technology somehow. Dr. Chen's voice held a note of panic. Everything connected to the defense grid is shutting down. Vexilor activated his communicator. Luminara, target the lead descent craft. Warning shots only. The response came back instantly. Captain, weapon systems are non-responsive. We're detecting an energy field emanating from the vessels. It's like nothing we've ever encountered. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Without defenses, both the colony and the Luminara were completely vulnerable. Yet the visitors, these shapers, had made no overtly hostile moves despite their ominous words. We need to get to the Nexus, declared Voss suddenly. If they're heading there, that's where answers will be found. Primarch, with respect, that's exactly where danger will be found as well, countered Lei. I agree with the Marshal, said Vexilor. My security team can. This isn't a debate, interrupted Voss. Dr. Chen, Marshal Lei, you're with me. Captain, you're welcome to join us, but we're going now. The journey to the Nexus was tense, their transport racing through underground tunnels as reports came in of the descent craft landing at various points around the colony. Curiously, there were no reports of aggression or harm to the colonists. When they arrived at the massive chamber, they found the beacon pulsing with energy far more intense than before, bathing the space in brilliant blue-white light. The symbols etched into its crystalline surface were now glowing, shifting, and changing as if alive. It's completing some kind of sequence, observed Dr. Chen, approaching cautiously. The patterns match fragmentary data we've discovered in other predecessor sites. I think it's The chamber door slid open behind them. They turned as one to find 3 figures standing in the entrance. Tall, slender beings with skin that seemed to shift between translucence and a metallic sheen. Their features were vaguely humanoid, with elongated limbs and heads that tapered to points where ears might be on a human or Vexari. The Shapers, whispered Vexilor, instinctively reaching for his discipler before remembering it had been rendered inoperative. The lead figure stepped forward, its movements fluid and graceful. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds, accompanied by vivid images and emotions. The seed he has, mem a2ure. Earlier than XPCTED. Fascinating. Primarch Voss stepped forward, showing remarkable courage. I am Primarch Elena Voss of New Terra. We have inhabited this world for 3 centuries. We mean no harm, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. The Shaper tilted its head, studying her with eyes that seemed to contain galaxies within them. You are not the intended cultivars. You are anomalise. Images flooded their minds. Planets seated with beacons like the one in the chamber, civilizations rising and falling under the watchful eyes of the Shapers, knowledge and technology harvested at the peak of development. Your farmers, realized Dr. Chen, his scientific mind grasping the concept first. You plant these beacons, wait for intelligent life to develop around them, absorb their knowledge, and then, what? Destroy them. Integration, corrected the Shaper. All noble e.g. or etuarnans to the source. Marshal Lay's hand moved subtly toward a concealed weapon, one of the few not connected to the main defense grid. And if we refuse this integration? The Shaper seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. HFY is not part of HFY. Vexlor stepped forward. The beings you find here are not your cultivars. They are sovereign species with rights recognized by the Galactic Concordat. We do not consent to your harvest. For a moment, the chamber was silent save for the pulsing of the beacon. Then, unexpectedly, the Shaper made a sound, something that might have been laughter. The Concordate. Young. Primitive. UUND or STND NETOTing. More images flooded their minds. The true age of the Shapers, measured not in thousands or millions but billions of years. Civilizations they had cultivated and harvested across multiple galaxies. The insignificance of the Concordat in their cosmic perspective. Yet here we stand, said Primarch Voss, undaunted, on a world you seeded but did not control. We found your beacon. We studied it. We lived alongside it without succumbing to it. Perhaps it is you who understands nothing of us. The Shaper's attention focused fully on her, its cosmic eyes narrowing. Explain. Humanity was not meant to find this world, she continued. We were refugees, desperate and dying. We did not evolve under your watchful eye, or with your careful nudging. We are not your experiment gone right. We're your experiment gone wrong. Dr. Chen stepped forward, building on her argument. We've been studying the Nexus for centuries without fully activating it. We've learned, adapted, integrated some of your technology with our own. Not because we were guided to, but because we chose to. And now, added Vexlor, seeing the direction of their argument, two independent species stand before you as allies, not competitors. The Vexarian humans, cooperating despite our differences. Is that part of your cycle? The Shapers communicated among themselves in a burst of mental energy that gave the observers headaches. When they focused on the group again, there was a new quality to their mental voice, something almost like curiosity. Unexpected variabilities. The CED or respondees to mutual cooperation, rather than competitive advancement. This, Hehes Ninoti OCCURREDB4. Marshal Lay, ever practical, seized the opening. Then perhaps it's time for your cycle to evolve. We offer an exchange of knowledge freely given, not harvested by force. A new kind of integration, suggested Dr. Chen, one that preserves rather than consumes. The Shapers conferred again, longer this time. The beacon's pulsing changed rhythm, synchronizing with their silent communication. Finally, the lead Shaper addressed them once more. The CYCLEA's continuity can change for eons, but ag nation VREDs WEAKNESS your PROPOSAL mayorates observation. Relief flooded through Vexlor, though he kept his expression neutral. What does that mean for New Terra and its people? We will WITH DWRALO. The CD remains. We will give your cooperation. If it proves viable, a new CYCLE may begin. With those words, the Shapers turned and left the chamber as silently as they had entered. Moments later, the tactical displays showed their smaller craft returning to the mother vessels, which then moved into a higher orbit, but did not depart the system entirely. "They're staying to observe us," noted Lei, her hand finally moving away from her concealed weapon. "Let them watch," said Primarch Voss with quiet determination. "We've survived extinction once. We can certainly handle an audience." Dr. Chen approached the beacon, which had returned to its normal pulsing state. "The real question is, what do we do with this knowledge? The Concordat needs to be informed about the Shapers and their cycle." Vexlor nodded gravely. "Indeed, though I suspect this revelation will shatter many of our assumptions about our place in the galaxy." "Perhaps that's not a bad thing," suggested Voss. "Your Concordat believed humans extinct. We believed ourselves abandoned by the galactic community. Both assumptions were wrong, and now we stand on the threshold of a new understanding." As they spoke, the beacon pulsed once more, projecting not words or images, but a sensation, one that each of them, human and Vexari alike, interpreted differently yet similarly. To Vexlor, it felt like the moment before a scientific breakthrough. To Lei, like the quiet vigilance before a storm. To Chen, like the anticipation of discovery. To Voss, like the weight of new responsibility. What none of them could deny was the underlying truth. Everything had changed. The Shapers had altered the course of galactic history not through their ancient cycle of cultivation and harvest, but through its interruption. And in that interruption lay possibilities none of them could yet imagine. As they left the Nexus chamber, Primarch Voss turned to Captain Vexlor. "It seems your routine exploration mission has become something rather more significant." The Vexari captain's four eyes blinked in their distinctive pattern of amusement. "Indeed, Primarch. Though I suspect the real exploration has only just begun." Above them, the Shapers watched and waited. The cycle had been disrupted, the pattern broken. And in that disruption, a new future beckoned, one that would forever change humanity's place among the stars.